Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us while we did our little pre-session photo. My name is Stacey Frisch. Good to see everybody here. I'm an APD at NYU Grossman School of Medicine, and I am so excited to be leading this session along with our incredible panel and our co-moderator, Arlene Chung. And today we're going to be talking about women's professional development programs. Hopefully my slides are going to be actually on the screen. Do we have, Ian, are the slides presentable? Hold on. Okay. Well, I'm just going to start off with a little bit of background about women's professional development programs, and to start off by saying that the reason that these programs exist is because of the gender disparities that exist in medicine. And today we're going to be talking about, yes, these are slides. Today we're going to be talking about some of these disparities, and we're going to be using some binary language like males compared to females, but I do want to also preface at the beginning that we know that there are other genders that do exist and that we are still gathering a body of literature on this sort of inclusive gender as it relates to medicine and emergency medicine, and so we're going to be presenting the data as we have it, and a lot of these may be relevant for other genders as well. And so I want to start out by talking about some of the issues that exist with gender in medicine as they relate to representation, compensation, and issues like burnout and attrition from the workforce. This study, titled Plenty of Mustaches But Not Enough Women, is an incredible satirical article where they surveyed the top 1,000 leaders at the top 50 NIH-funded medical schools, and what they found was that 13% of those leaders were female, and 19% of those leaders had mustaches. And so they titled this article in such a way that you can really see that we are quite far from gender equity in medicine. And we know that this is a bigger issue as you progress further and further up the academic ladder, with the numbers of women dwindling as you get to the full professor level as well as the chair and dean level. There are also issues with compensation. This is the MACM report from last year, the most recent one, where you can see the discrepancy between male and female specialist salaries. The interesting thing about these reports is that they also break down things like confounders that might account for this discrepancy. And what they find is that only about 70% of this compensation disparity is addressed by these confounders, things that are such as part-time status, degrees, titles and roles, as well as specialty choice. And the other 30% is completely unaccounted for, even when you adjust for those confounders. We're also gathering a lot more data on attrition in the workforce. I'm seeing a lot of nods. Maybe people are familiar with this table and with this data. We know that females in emergency medicine are leaving much earlier than their male counterparts at a median age of 43.7 compared to a median age of 53.5 for male emergency physicians. It's kind of staggering. And there's been a lot of solutions that have been proposed to some of these issues. Things like DEI committees, objective hiring and promotion structure, transparent salary structure, bias awareness trainings and implicit bias trainings, as well as upstander trainings, parental leave policies that allow for equitable leave, protection from workplace violence and sexual harassment. And today we're going to be focusing on one of these solutions, which is women's professional development programs. The reason that we're going to be focusing on this today is because through these women's professional development programs, we can use our collective voices to advocate for all of these types of changes that would bring us closer to true equity in medicine and in emergency medicine in particular. And the other reason that we're focusing on women's professional development programs is because this is within reach for all of us. All of us have the opportunity to participate at either an institutional level or a local or regional level or a national level in one of these programs. Can I get a show of hands of who in the audience is participating in their own program? Okay, excellent, excellent. So across the US, we have multiple different programs that exist both in medicine as a whole, as well as in emergency medicine for the advancement of women. And these types of programs have the following objectives, including providing mentors and role models, offering career advice and professional advancement and leadership skills, increasing academic recognition for women, promoting work-life integration, as well as advocacy for all of those other solutions that I mentioned before. These are some commonly presented topics within sessions in these programs, and actually the order from top to bottom are the most commonly presented to least commonly presented. And the most commonly presented topics include things like mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching, work-life balance and integration, compensation and negotiation, as well as teamwork and communication. And today we are going to be talking specifically about how we have all had various different experiences in these programs, which has led us to take away multiple learning points. And we're hoping to share with you some things that you might be able to bring back to your own programs, or if you're looking to start a newer program or increase your program's catch, then these are the types of things that we're going to be covering today. And we're also going to be having an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. We have a QR code for you to submit questions live to. So I'll put that up in just a second. But first, I want to have all of these incredible panelists introduce themselves. And we'll start with Arlene, who's going to be moderating with me.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. Come in, have a seat. It's going to be a very friendly group here with lots of discussion, both among our panelists, but we're really hoping to get some audience participation as well. My name is Arlene Chung. I am the Vice Chair of Academic Affairs at the University of Vermont, and I'm super excited to be here, mostly to learn from my amazing peers up here on the panel. Do you want to start?
And we'll have the panelists introduce yourselves if you can just go one by one.
I'm Michelle Lin. I'm a health services researcher at Stanford. I have been pretty involved in AEMUS. Previously was VP of, one of the VPs and secretary, and helped start a group at Mount Sinai Beth Israel, where I was attending previously for 8 years, and still am involved in the Stanford Women's EM group, where I'm currently working.
I'm Jen Love. I'm assistant professor at Mount Sinai, where Michelle was a mentor of mine. And I have been involved in AEMUS, and I'm still involved at AEMUS, but got into this space actually as a resident at the University of Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Nicole Klakowski. I'm faculty at the University of Michigan, where I am the director of the Gender Equity Professional Development Group for our department, and lead a fearless team in trying to put on some of these women professional development activities. I apologize for the background noise, and I also participated heavily as a resident, so I'm grateful to be here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Riddhi Desai. I am a second-year medical education fellow at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. I am a part of our FemInEM group at Maimonides, and I'm also now working on like a women's symposium, a women's health symposium in Ukraine next week.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, they have it. As well as helping build women in academic institutions.
Yeah, there you go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Debjani Das. I work with Penny at Columbia Medical Center, where I am the clerkship director as well as the director of ultrasound. I have been involved with women in academic medicine. I'm one of the former presidents of AEMUS, and currently working with our women's group at Columbia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Magid. I'm a PGY3 at NYP Columbia Cornell, so I work with Penny and Dev, and I am involved in sort of having started up, relaunched, I guess it had existed pre-COVID, relaunching, and now one of the co-chairs of our women's group.
Hello, everyone. I'm Valerie Dobiesz. I work at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. I've been very involved my whole career in advancing women. I was at the University of Illinois in Chicago on part of the College of Medicine to advance women and underrepresented in medicine. And then I transitioned to Boston in 2016 and helped with many others create a consortium at HMS, Harvard Medical School, the 4 different hospitals that are independent. But we created this consortium to help try and advance our women and promote our women in leadership positions because of these gender inequities. So I'm thrilled to be part of this panel.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw this up here. This is a QR code where you can submit live questions. So feel free to go ahead and fill that out, and we'll go ahead and go through those questions and be asking them of the panel. I'll start off with my own question, which is, what inspired you to start your women's professional development programs, and what were you hoping to accomplish?
I'm happy to start. So what inspired me to start a women's professional development group when I was a resident at Penn, she's actually sitting right there in the third row, and she'll be embarrassed that I tell this story, but Cindy was chief when I was a medical student, and brought some of us interns sort of into the fold, and we sort of talked a lot about the challenges that we were having as women in the department, but also sort of looked around us, and we had faculty that was, I think, close to, if not more than 50% women. And when we all got together at times, we realized what like rich mentorship they were providing, that they were real people like us who put their pants on the same way, and like were very willing to share their like individual experiences and advice and whatnot. And so there's the other one who inspired me to start the Penn group. And so together with residents and Cindy and Angela Mills right there, we started this group and started putting programming together, and just really capitalizing on this amazingly strong group of women surrounding us.
And I'll dovetail with Jen to talk about when I moved to Boston, it's a new ecosystem. I didn't know the faculty, and I work best collaboratively with others, and I wanted to meet the women in particular to see what was happening. And I went around to Boston Children's, to Mass General, to Beth Israel, and met the different women faculty, and there was a grassroots interest, and they found a need and a value to being better together. And so we organically, the inspiration was to gather this incredible group of women who are incredibly inspiring and in silos, and you don't know what they do or the amazing work. So we gathered together and we started to have champions from each site to share our work and organize like the list of didactics on networking, negotiation, et cetera. So that was very inspirational to me, is to get to know these women and network and build a community. Again, I thrive best when I work together with others and to hear what they're doing. And so I encourage others to do this. It can be done. So that's what my inspiration was.
Excellent, thank you. And what was the process like for those of you who developed your group's mission, or maybe you refined it? What was the process like in that, and what did you think was important to include?
Okay, I'm with somebody though. Okay. So the mission statement is, once you get the group together of dynamic, inspirational women, it's not hard to develop your mission about what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. And so we did this in a democratic, communal way. We decided, we did a needs assessment. What does everybody want? What is it that we need? What is our highest priorities? And so we were easily able to develop our mission statement about what we wanted to do and develop the organizational structure to help support it. So
I think it also depends on what you're trying to fill with your group. One of the women's groups I was able to develop was because in one institution, all the leaders were male, and they said, oh, the women are happy. And so we gave them data, like let's do data of everybody, male, females, and show satisfaction scores. And also in this board of directors model, compensation is deemed by the board, which was 100% male at that time. So the woman annually had to get voted in. There were no women, so we strategically formed a women's group to figure out who's going to go up. And we voted internally, and all voted for that woman to be on the board. And so to this day, it's been like 8 years. years, there's a woman on the board, now 2. So it depends on what your gap and outcomes measures are. Another one is like our residents or med students probably we needed more pipeline women leaders. So creating opportunities for mentorship and leadership. So I think it depends on what gap you're fulfilling, and then to create a mission and statement with that group.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty, right? Like, I'm sure that's what everyone here is wondering, like, how do I actually do this? And what does that look like? And recognizing that every program has different needs and is working with different resources, I'd love to hear from the panel. How did you make those decisions? How did you decide how often you were going to meet, who you were going to include, what types of topics you were going to cover, what was your scope? How did you decide all of those things?
I can start. I can speak to this. So we had initially, we're by campus, so we're lucky to have sort of 2 different institutions, and we are also lucky to have a lot of sort of female mentorship high up and like real buy-in. So a small group of us sort of met and tried to be really thoughtful about what we wanted to do with our group. We had this idea of building out a women's group, but we thought amongst ourselves what we wanted to do. We sort of developed some objectives, a mission statement, and then we brought it to the women and said, what would you like what's of interest to you as a woman? So that's kind of how we started the process. And then in terms of the things we do, it was really important for us to be inclusive. In sort of all the iterations, whatever that means. So gender inclusivity, we're really lucky that we have men, women, other people from all genders and all identities participating in our events. And then also we've hosted a number of events that have been very successful. I think we started with sort of like lighter, like, hey, come to like a happy hour and learn about this over margaritas and tacos. So that got a lot of, that like developed a lot of interest. We've done more sort of like traditional like women's group events, so like pregnancy, fertility and stuff, but we didn't want to limit it to that. We've had mentorship events, but we also have some Bollywood dance classes, like a podcast book club type of thing. So for us, it was just about inclusivity and making sure that everyone was involved. And then, so as a resident, I was really excited to have people from all different levels of training. So we have med students, we have sub-Is up through like our very senior faculty.
I will add on to that. So I think, one thing is to consider your target audience as part of your mission, and that may be very narrow initially, or it may be very broad. So if you're, for example, focused on trainees, residents, you may have some different focus to your curriculum versus if you're focusing more on faculty development, and I would say we try to balance both. The other thing is to try to keep leadership and inclusivity balance. So keeping an eye on some of these sort of goals that we have and some of the topics that we really know from the literature we need to focus on to develop women, while also being mindful of what is going on currently. So for example, most recently our women faculty have been very interested in ideas of plagiarism and protection against accusations of that, and how do you navigate that within your institution. And then finally, I would say is, as much as the community building among women is like super duper essential, I think it's also really important to consider how to make sure you're visible to the entire department, and making sure you're visible to all members. So I've tried very intentionally at Michigan to make sure we have some events every year that are open to everyone, whether that's mentorship to make sure we're, making sure everybody has access to all of the mentors, whether that's a workshop on nonviolent communication or a workshop on, our Spectrum Center is going to come in the fall and do a workshop on use of pronouns, which is something we can kind of all gather around and can really sort of further our mission among the entire department.
I'm glad that you mentioned the current events thing, because I feel like things are just changing and so much is coming out so frequently, and the residents are also having these experiences in the ED. And so we always ask them like a month or two before, like, hey, what are things that have been going on that you really want to talk about? And then we'll try to kind of pull an article that has recently come out so that we'll go through it once a week before, have a few questions to kind of ignite discussion about that. And then we'll just see kind of where the event goes from there. But we keep it as like informal as possible and just as relevant as we possibly can so that they know that we care about their needs. And then the other thing is that, we don't really have funding for it, so we had to apply for a grant, and then the grant doesn't cover all the things like food and things like that. So we also had to think about how to have low budget events that are still really fun and exciting, and things like potlucks and things like that. So.
I'm just going to add a couple more examples of the more popular sessions that we've had at our institution. So I think we've had like career coach come and do an assessment, and that can be really helpful. Even if you can't pay them, it's a nice way for them to meet some potential future clients. I think once a year our chair hosts the event at her house, and she'll often have a speaker come, and she's had some female chairs from other institutions come talk, so that's been really wonderful. And then we've had a Partners to Women EM an event, which is really great and inclusive because it can be really hard to be a partner to anyone working in emergency medicine. And I think some of the partners enjoy some bonding over that, and often the kids come to that because he was watching the kids. And then the last one is an allyship one. So having some of our male colleagues, sort of do a workshop on, how to help, stand up to microaggressions and other things like that. So those have been some of the more popular and inclusive ones.
Just to add a little bit on that, I love that idea of all the different things that you had brought with your group. We also had a really fun one where we did I did not come up with the title, but it was the PDOM podcast night where you talked about the podcast retrievals, if any of you know about it. And that was actually a really fun and interesting night of conversation. So, and one other thing that I wanted to really emphasize was developing a pipeline for groups like this. I've definitely been involved in groups where we came in very excited, and there may have been like a single resident at the time that was really interested in it. But then not having somebody to take over that role once that resident graduates is a huge problem. So I would really encourage mentorship is a great way to do it, but also just to develop that pipeline so that you can continue the group in as many iterations as you need it.
And I'll just say that if you're looking for inspiration for some events, AEMUS has a great series of webinars that they did during COVID. We've done a lot of didactics over the years. So I've used something, there's a great negotiation online workshop that was done, and we kind of watched it together on Zoom and like paused it at different places to like engage in conversation. So please use the resources of AEMUS to inspire you if you're trying to think of some events.
Amazing. I'm going to take some moderator liberty here and just say that you all share. I was going to ask you next, what do you think are your keys for success? But so many of you shared some of them, like responding to the local needs of your community. I heard a lot of comments about allyship and not making it an us versus them type of group, but really trying to be inclusive of all people in the community that you're working with. I heard some discussions about how to find funding and other resources, both money and sort of non-monetary related, and looking externally to groups like AEMUS and other professional development groups out there that can really help you develop a pipeline and other things as you're trying to craft kind of what you want to do with these groups. So here's the kicker, right? Now, these are all great, but for any of you that have tried to start one of these programs, we all know that there's a number of barriers and challenges that exist. So I would love to hear from the panel. What are the types of barriers that you've encountered, and more importantly, how have you attempted successfully or unsuccessfully to overcome them?
One of our barriers is actually attendance because of the way our scheduling works, where everyone wants to come, but they can't because they're working. So we try to cater it to importance to the residents so that they can all make it. And so Tuesday nights are like the protected night because conference is on Wednesdays. So like once a month on Tuesday evenings, we'll have our women's event So that's how we've been planning it. We also, the three of us and some others, wrote like a scoping review about women's professional development groups and emergency medicine residencies. It just came out in like Academic of Emergency Medicine journal recently, and we basically piled all of like the different ways that programs that do exist kind of cater to their teams. So some do like a different day every single month. So if one month it's on a Monday, the next month it's on a Wednesday night, the next time it's on a Friday night, to see if that can help with attendance as well. And then another obstacle for us is also just a big one that I mentioned before is funding. So I think like I tell myself that if I am going to a new place at some point and I want to start this organization, I have to go to the chair with some sort of proposal to, and maybe even do a needs assessment with the faculty or the residents that are there to come up with like why this is so important and why this needs to exist and why we should have funding for it.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think that one of the barriers can sometimes be resistance from the leadership that this is not a problem I've faced, but I know that different institutions have. But I think, yes, doing a needs assessment is definitely a great start. There's also a ton of literature out there that we just kind of went through to outline why it's so important to have these types of groups. So presenting actual data can sometimes be very helpful as well.
And leadership doesn't like to look at the numbers. When we try to dig into like our faculty and what ranks we are, like Harvard is very challenging to advance. I don't know if you know that, but I got demoted big time from professor to I got shot down, but I'm building myself back up. But it's very hard, and the differences and the disparities. So we wanted to look at data, actually. We wanted to look, and it's easy because the ranks, there's huge discrepancy. How many women were at instructor level, assistant. We have 0, actually, professors, women, across Harvard Medical School. There is no woman professor in emergency medicine. Are you listening to that? That is ridiculous. And there are rock stars. I cannot even tell you how much publication, like rock stars, in the academy. But when we started looking, they didn't want to see, and we were looking at like how long it took people to get their paperwork in. There was big barriers to like getting your papers in to assistant, from instructor to assistant. And we thought there were disparities, and we started to do a whole Excel spreadsheet. We were looking at it, and they wouldn't get the data. We couldn't, there was resistance because they didn't want, maybe theoretically from an institution that may or may not be mine, but there's resistance to getting the data because they don't want to look at it. It's not pleasant, and it reflects poorly, and no one wants to think that they're discriminatory. No one wants that. Everybody means well. Everybody wants to advance their people, but when you really look at it, the data is clear. There are still disparities, and why, and so that's a challenge, and data's powerful. We looked at different shifts, and our women had different swing shifts, late swing shifts to the men on which weekends, and we started looking at data, and they changed the way, and they started looking at that. But it was counterproductive for our women to be, have these shifts and be able to go to meetings and do their work. So data and getting it is powerful if you can to show these disparities, but there's resistance to showing things that people don't want to see. That's what I would say.
I would also add that certainly I'm definitely on the data side, and that's part of my research brain of collecting data for all of these things, but also understanding implementing this group, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so if you are going to go to a chair with a proposal, making sure that they understand that this is a 3-year plan to show them gains, that you're not going to put this into place, have high attendance programming, and get a grant funding for it, and get everybody on board in a single year. You have to set reasonable expectations with them that this is a 3 to 5 year process, the same way that you would do it for an NIH grant or something like that, and make sure that you give yourself that timeline and that grace to understand that setting this type of thing up is not going to just happen in a year, and setting reasonable expectations with your chair when you make that plan.
Here, I'll be the.
I just have a question. What are you guys going to use for outcome data? Because I think that.
Return on investment is what you need, and what is your data metrics? What do you use?
So I think this one is hard because there are so many intangibles, and we chose to just study this qualitatively. So I studied AEM. It's not a secret. So I interviewed former A1 leaders, but from different career stages. And it's not that we don't know where the gaps are coming from. We know what is contributing to these persistent gender disparities. It is a lack of sponsorship, right? Like the men understand the game, they tell the other men that this is how the game works, and they pull each other into the game. And we don't even know there's a game, right, when we're starting out. And so there's a lack of self-promotion. It's very uncomfortable for us, but we're really good at doing that for each other, right? And so when we interviewed women who had been part of AEM, these are the types of things they said that AEM did for them. And the other thing that happens is, like, when I get mad, I write a paper. This is a problem I want to solve. And so AEM has been an incredible resource for me, because there's a lot of women who are really mad about a lot of things and who are really productive. And we write papers about the things that we're mad about, but that is academic currency, right? They want to see you write papers and get published and get promoted. And so I find that a really effective way to channel my rage and make friends that are going to be lifelong colleagues. The thing that it was intangible that we really felt like we got qualitatively was a sense of belonging and reduction in professional isolation, because retention is a crisis in our specialty, as Stacey mentioned earlier. It is not okay that the average woman practices for 10 years after residency and leaves at the age of 43. And a big part of the reason why we only have 11% female chairs, which is like the second highest of any subspecialty, despite being 60-40 men-women, is because women are just not making it. And so really, it's a long-term outcome. And I don't know, you could do a survey, showing that, you're improving the sense of belonging, showing that you're improving this, but it's for the long game. And I think a chair has to recognize that. And even if you can't show like a 2 or 3 year ROI, it's about doing this for that.
I was just going to say, some of the papers I'm looking at, almost all institutions have some sort of quote about like the cost of recruitment, and it's in the hundreds and thousands of dollars. So if you do follow this over time and you start looking very early and can show that anybody attributed staying to a mentorship program, suddenly the ROI looks giant if you can just keep a person or two. So if you can get those numbers from your institution, that might be something that money talks, but might be more quantitative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to build this into, other places. Like, I sit on the awards committee, and as part of the Departmental Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Award, we want departments to show that they have achieved salary equity and promotion equity, and we want that included in their application for the award. And if they can't show that, they're not going to be very competitive for this award. We've been discussing like a wellness award. Show us how many faculty have left in the last 5 years, and what you're doing to address that, right? And so I think, taking the things that we know and building them into, national programs is, one part of the solution.
Thank you. That's great. Do we have? Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thinking of the old adage of like, what can men do to support feminism, the dishes, or that meme where it shows a man and a woman racing on a hurdle track, and the man's path is clear and the woman's path has like a laundry machine, a sink full of dishes, and 2 kids in diapers, and elderly parents in front of her. And I feel like so many of the women's advancement programs that I've seen are about giving us better sneakers or teammates, or power bars, yoga mats. There's not
Pizza.
right. Like the things that want to advance us professionally, but there isn't that much to take away those hurdles. And I'm curious if any institutions you've seen have really implemented, outsourcing support. We have like backup childcare, but things like house cleaning or elderly care, or things that really take those hurdles out of the way in a meaningful way in your expertise or in what you see professionally.
Thank you. So yes, backup care is essential. Elder care, child care, benefits packages for parental leave, also professional development, tuition reimbursements for your professional development for masters. There was something else you said that house cleaning. Columbia, they have partnered with AAMC also, and also applied for some grants that if for the next year, if you go to a conference and require childcare, they'll pay for up to $1,000 for your childcare on site or at home. So there's a reimbursement there. You might want to, and then there's also the AAMC Women's Leadership Professional Development. They'll pay for your conferences too if you get in. So there's some things. Yeah. Dr. Wolf, yes.
Stanford a few years ago did a small pilot program where they added extra cost for their attending instead of giving them an hourly rate. They gave them coupons for like Blue Apron or having some
Dry
So I don't know if that program has continued, but it
wait here.
It hasn't, sadly.
Wah, 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 wah. That was nice. Dry cleaning, you could cash in for, you could do.
Yeah, it was like a period thing, and I think there was some outside funding that like didn't continue. Can you explain what that is? Sorry, I don't know what it is. I wasn't there, I'm newer, but yeah,
people who are willing to pick up shifts, they could get either your hourly rate, or you could get credit towards Blue Apron, credit towards dry cleaning, credit towards having a house cleaner, and our moonlighting rates, they're fine, but some people might value these other things more.
That question actually really dovetails nicely with one of the questions that somebody in the audience submitted, so I just want to piggyback that, and we'll transition to some of these submitted questions now. I'm not sure if we'll have time to go through all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can, and then if you have questions that are still remaining, we encourage you to come up and talk to the panel after the session. But this first question is, how can we as a group of women in leadership positions support childbearing accommodations and support during residency and in early emergency medicine careers?
And we have several senior leaders in the audience, so I will also open that up to our audience members to answer as well.
We have started at Michigan some, it's very early, but we do have some scheduling accommodations and encourage residents who are becoming a parent to have that conversation with residency leadership to see what is possible. So, for example, it has been identified that if you're a lactating resident and you're on like 9 main overnight shifts in a row, that kind of may tank your supply. So trying to make sure that of course, they have to do the same requirements and they have to complete the same number of shifts, but are there creative ways that we can just manage their shifts in a way that they're not compounded together like that, to give them some breathing room? So again, it's not perfect, but it's a start, and I'm curious to hear what others are doing.
So I'm certainly not in a position of leadership, but I happen to have been a pregnant resident. So I can speak a little bit to that. We have, in keeping with policy, we are guaranteed no nights during our 3rd trimester of pregnancy, which came into place after I was in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy. I had a neonate by then, but I still think it's a really important advancement. And then this is so soft, but just culturally, and I think it really comes from up high, everybody seemed really accepting of my personal situation, and there's just an awareness, people were asking me if I needed to leave and pump. I don't feel like it was stigmatized at all. I feel like people, for the most part, just really were really open to understanding that I was in a different situation and wanted to help me, and still obviously meet everything that I needed to meet as a resident. I still have to hit my hours. But I don't know the takeaway exactly. you have to work with amazing people. So go to a place where there are great people. But
I think just to add to that, some of the other things that I've seen and some of the things that we do at NYU, we also meet with the residents one by one if they're planning a leave or family planning, and we go over all of their options. Everything is very laid out for them, and we have written policies that detail this so that everybody knows, like, your leave is going to be, you can have the same amount of leave as somebody else. It's not like we like you more and we're going to give you more leave or something like that. And the other things that we do are looking at transition back to residency or transition back to work. Like, what does that look like? And we try to work the rotations based on scheduling and flexibility of scheduling, because we want to be accommodating for doctor's appointments and that kind of stuff. We also stack the sick call schedule for before somebody is expecting, because we know that they might be out even if they're preferring to be scheduled for emergency medicine blocks, and we'll have to fill in those shifts. And we offer the option to extend training if they want to take a longer leave than they would be able to take without extending their training. And in addition, for our faculty, they allow you to have a little bit more schedule flexibility. So they allow you to pre-work shifts so that you can add on leave that would be paid leave. As somebody who was applying for academic positions about a year ago or something like that, I can say that what I noticed in terms of the leave discrepancies across institutions was that some people were offering as little as 1 week of paid leave. Other than that, you just get disability payment for 6 weeks if you have a vaginal delivery or 8 weeks if you have a C-section delivery. But it's much less than your standard salary. And other programs offer as much as 12 weeks of paid leave. That's what I've seen. Maybe some people offer more here. How many? 14 weeks. 13 weeks. Okay. We have a bid. Yeah, it's very variable, but I think that that's one of the things that we can consider in terms of both. Yeah.
You're all surprised about 13, and I think you said somebody had 1 week. I heard somebody.
Yes.
Told me they had 6 weeks, and I was like, 6 weeks? That's craziness.
I'll out them to you privately.
And I just want to say, I put in a little plug. We just are publishing. It's fresh off the press. You have it?
Yeah, it's in the Annals of EM, April 2024. Michelle Lall, Lall, is the first author. It's a list of best practice recommendations.
Last author.
Yes, Valerie Dobiesz is last author. You could talk about it.
This took years to put out there. Consensus-driven recommendations for family-friendly policies, lactation, how much time, and it's data-driven, so literature and industry, what is out in the industry, what is out in, data. There is data on night shifts early in pregnancy. We always talk about late, but first trimester pregnancy, when a lot of people don't come forward, more than 2 nights, for example, bodes poorly for or can put the pregnancy at risk. And so there's guidelines that it was very difficult to vet through 11 different organizations in emergency medicine to put consensus-driven. And we're hoping. I sent it to our leadership, fresh off the press, that. So there are literature-backed, industry-backed consensus on bringing it to your departments. What's difficult, community, that are single covered, and this is your salary fee-for-service, different practice models to implement these are challenging. Those that get 1 week off and you're paid for what you work and you don't get time off, it's challenging across the board. But the recommendations are out there on these policies to help support us, parents, those who are pregnant, support us for families and leaves and trying to get pregnancy, surrogacy, and lactation. And, there's data out there that should drive the change in our culture about supporting child. The question was about childcare, supporting us to have families, but also careers in emergency medicine. It's doable. We can do this.
Yeah, we also get, I think, 14 weeks for vaginal delivery, 18 for C-section paid, and for the faculty for 1 year are exempt from overnights and sick call. So yeah, it's online. Happy to share it.
I think also being cognizant of the different communities and different needs. We had a single dad who wanted to be a parent, had a child and had a division support with babysitting and how to teach, trying to be the family support for a few months during his leave. And then we also offered during COVID, we had a workshop from our LGBTQ Alliance group on roadmap to parenting for LGBT faculty. And that was really eye-opening. Like there were so many challenges, legal, adoption, different opportunities and policies that were supportive of their roadmap. So that different communities, just being cognizant. And then there was some women said, I chose not to have children. I want to be part of this women's group, but this is not a priority for me. So just to be inclusive of everybody. And so we've heard a lot of different voices and to be inclusive.
Thank you. I think, there was one more question that I just want to address briefly, which is, what is the one thing I can do today to start a program at my institution? We're all going to go around and kind of talk about some of our takeaways from this session, and so I think that we're going to get at some of that, but if anybody is looking for more resources in this area, I have a ton more resources, and I am happy to share them. This is all, open access kind of stuff, so please feel free to reach out to myself, or I'm sure any of the panelists would be happy to share a lot of these resources with you. And with that, I'll ask that our panelists go down the line. Maybe we'll go reverse order. So Penny, if you want to start, and just let us know what you want the audience to take away from the session. What's the one thing that you want the audience to go home and to share broadly?
Find your community, find your niche, and even if it takes just 2 or 3 of you, it can happen. I remember sitting at a conference with Arlene and another colleague at Feminem, our first, and we made a program grant for New York ASAP for pipeline for residents and mid-career and senior career faculty to have a mentorship group. So it could just happen with your community. And also for those who are junior faculty or residents or students, sometimes communicate what your wants are. People might not read your mind and it might not land. Just continue to communicate that to your sponsors, your mentors, what you would like professionally.
Just to piggyback on that, I would say make sure that you have a very clear mission, aims, vision of what the group, what your intentions are. And again, to piggyback on something we said earlier, which is that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, right? So really space out what your goals are and don't try to do everything within a short period of time. Would be my advice.
I'll also kind of piggyback on that. But I think for me, inclusivity was a big one. So in sort of every sense of the term, inclusivity in terms of like everyone, no matter how they identify in terms of gender, so allyship, but also inclusivity in terms of the different experiences of people in the women's group. So like we were just alluding to, like many people are child-free by choice, that not all women's events have to center on sort of child-rearing, childbearing. That I think that's a big one. And then also what I just like sort of as a plug for any of the trainees here, I agree with what Penny was saying, just like let people know what you want, and you'll, I think, be surprised with what can happen.
Thank you. My word would be sustainability is succession planning. You get champions and you drive it and they organize, they make it happen. And then they transition out, and there's less enthusiasm, less energy. I've seen it in multiple, permutations, is you have to have that succession planning. You've got to have somebody who's engaged, motivated, and keeps it going, because it will, and maybe that's the flow of it, the ebbs and flows, there's seasons for it, but just kind of keep that in mind as how to keep it sustainable with not the same people doing it all the time, because they tap out, and it's one of the services that we do that's uncompensated many times. And even if you have a little buy down, it's never enough to cover the work that is done. So try and implement a sustainable plan for the long haul. It is a marathon. We're not there. It's going to take a long time, and think about that in advance.
I think it's really important to start small. I used to be sad when, like, at some of our meetings, there would only be like 5 people, but I remind myself that as long as it's enlightening, inspiring, and safe for everyone that's there, you will keep making those small ripples, and more people are going to come every time, and that's what's going to create the wave to either change policies within your department or give you, what you need from the stakeholders. So.
Thank you. One thing I would add is to just put something on the calendar, no matter how small it might be, whatever your first digestible chunk is, to put it on the calendar. And then also to really be intentional about being inclusive in the whole department so that you can raise your visibility, build the culture, cultivate the culture that you think is important to make sure that everyone is being promoted and having a fulfilling career, and really cultivating those allyship relationships that can just be so helpful in the long run.
My advice would be join AEMUS. AEMUS, like, I'm very junior in my career, but I will say that joining AEMUS and taking the leap of faith to become part of the leadership group within AEMUS and really investing myself in the organization is easily one of the top 3 decisions I have made to improve my life as an academic woman. And I cannot even tell you the return on investment of joining AEMUS, because it is just tremendous. So please, we would love to have you.
And you don't have to be senior. You can be a leader as a resident. I was a committee chair the first year I joined AEMUS, and I was VP by my second year. So if you want to do things, AEMUS will support you and push you into a leadership role to make it happen. Since Jen took my one thing, my one thing would be, even if you can't create a longitudinal curriculum, just have one event. If it's too much to do multiple events, just have one, right? And start with that, because I think even just that one event, people will really value, and you see what the feedback is that you get from that, and find your other co-leaders and see where you can take it from there.
What am I going to say to all that? Join AEMUS. Join AEMUS. I've learned a ton over the last 50 minutes or so. I mean, my one contribution, and this I think applies to no matter what kind of change you want to make in your department, is just keep your eye on the prize, right? I think it's very easy to hone down on the details of only 5 people attended, I'm too overwhelmed by this list, my idea was shot down, I got no funding. It's very easy to just get discouraged by those little details, but just try to take the 10,000-foot view. Remember why you're doing it. Hold tight to your mission. And you don't do it alone, right? And have a group mission and a shared vision. And I think you'll have a lot more success that way.
And speaking of don't do it alone, I think that my one takeaway is that individually, we're all just one person, and it can feel like we can't really make significant progress in some of these systemic barriers that exist. But if you think about it collectively, we're so much louder, and we know that our voices are heard a lot more. And so we need to work together and really work collectively as a group to really move the needle on some of these gender disparity issues in our field. Thanks.